The family that vacations together stays together. At least, that was the plan. Except now, the Dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for the stay.
Welcome to episode 101 of the Inside Job Boards and Recruitment Marketplaces podcast. Yes, 101. And if you've listened to all of them, my apologies. I'm Stephen Rothberg. I am the founder of College Recruiter Job Search Site, where we believe that every student and recent graduate deserves a great career and that it should be easy and inexpensive for employers to hire them. As usual, I am joined here by my partner in crime, Peter Zollman. Peter, great to see you today.
Thank you very much. And if you have listened to all 101 of them, thank you very much.
Oh, that's so much
imagine,
nicer.
But thank you very much. We're joined today by Veer Kashyap. He's general partner of Zeta Ventures everywhere in India. They are investing in early stage companies leveraging India. He is a former executive at Indeed and Recruit. Before that, he was co-founder of Baba Jobs, which is India's largest lightly skilled job marketplace. They compete with Naukri and a few others. And he's going to talk about how the world of blue-collar entry-level marketplaces is changing, particularly in emerging markets. So, Veer, get it right, third time's a charm. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Tell us about blue-collar, lightly skilled marketplaces in emerging markets.
Thanks, Peter, Stephen. Great to be here. And one thing I'll start off with is that they're evolving very fast, right? And so, like the things we had to deal with when we were starting Baba Job back in 2008 are very, very different from what someone starting a similar, marketplace has to deal with today. And because we had to initially, it was you have that subset of the population didn't have access to the internet, and so you literally had to build hacks around that. So I think that was one of the big differentiators back in the day, was just the access to technology, right? And so I think we take it for granted here. Now we're into our, almost everyone has access somewhere to broadband and mobile internet or Wi-Fi, but that's not a foregone conclusion in still some parts of the world, but it's improved massively over the past 5 years in places like India, especially, right? So I think that's one, is like take that as an assumption in some places, and that's not something that not everyone has access to. Or once you have access, and it takes, I think, a couple of years for you to get used to even using it in a comfortable way, right? As we all experienced in the early days of the internet.
When Peter was doing the introduction and before we jumped on, we were talking about how your funds focus on lightly skilled. Maybe for the listeners who are kind of confused by what you mean by that, is lightly skilled the same as what a lot of people might call blue collar? Are there differences?
Yeah, I mean, the terminology is very confusing, and it's you never quite get it right. I think it was the founder of Snap, if one of the largest marketplaces in the U.S. that used that term, and that I like that, but it's because blue collar gives that impression of very factory oriented jobs, and a lot of them are, at least in India that we were serving, that is obviously a subset, but a lot of the jobs were not necessarily that. So that's why blue collar definitely is one way to call it, but lightly skilled is also one way. But I don't know if there's the right terminology of how to describe a marketplace like this.
So you're including things like retail, like customer
100%.
service, those what a lot of people might refer to as hourly, or I've heard people recently talking about sitting down versus standing up
Yeah.
jobs.
we have the deskless. I've heard deskless is one term. Sometimes I see companies use in the way they describe themselves. We're the X for deskless workers, which is which is not a bad way to describe it, because the way it depends. I've seen that in a lot of HR tech companies use that term, because the types of technology you develop are very different for people that aren't sitting at a desk. And so that's actually fairly accurate for a lot of part of the HR tech stack. And then because then you're almost exclusively dealing with people on mobile devices, right? If they're deskless, then they're not sitting at a computer, and then the way you design software for them is very, very different.
Now, what kinds of companies are you looking at for investment, or that you are investing in now, that reach those workers?
Yeah, so I mean, we're not exclusively focused on just these types of marketplaces or this sector. It's one of the areas we look at, but it's and we see it evolving very fast. But we basically look at companies that are leveraging India in any way. So it could be that part of their team is sitting in India. Part of the team maybe based in India, selling to a global market. We typically look for companies that have some sort of a cross-border interplay between them. And obviously there are applicabilities. We've looked at a bunch of companies that help enable cross-border work, which is fairly large in certain corridors, in certain industries, in certain segments. And so there are, a few players there that are growing. We're definitely tracking a company out of India, for example, that is providing, helping folks that in industries where they're short in countries like Europe, for example, truck drivers, but there is a decent chunk of them coming out of India that go and immigrate and work these jobs in Europe. Same thing in healthcare, nurses, especially the southern part of India has a huge, surplus of skilled nurses that go all around the world and help. And in this country, and it's not as large. It's obviously further away, there is a certain population, but they have a large in the southern state of Kerala in India, for example. There's a large number of skilled nurses that travel all around the world, in Middle East and Europe especially.
And are you investing in just job boards more broadly, any kind of TA tech more broadly, any kind of HR tech, maybe even more broadly?
Yes, I'd say we don't really, invest just in job boards at all. It's much more broader than that. So it's a lot more. HR tech is one of the segments, and along with a few other areas that we look at, because it's as I said, the applicability of that cross border aspect is a little less, in job boards. We find like a lot more job boards are started in and focus on a particular geography. So,
Definitely.
and so there's still so many local nuances there. So except when there's a migration, or there's a team that's come out of a certain place that's building, due to a certain experiential background that we feel would be stronger. We look more along along the tools and stuff, and a lot of these guys can use more of the picks and shovels would be a little bit more interesting, for a fund like ours. And so we do look. Obviously, there's a ton of AI recruiter software out there right now, that folks that are automating interviews and things like that, and the matching and searching, and so there's it's the market is fairly flooded with those types of companies right now, I'd say.
I want to take a break real quick just to let you know about a new show we've just added to the network. Up Next at Work, hosted by Gene and Kata Keel of the Devon Group. Fantastic show. If you're looking for something that pushes the norm, pushes the boundaries, has some really spirited conversations, Google Up Next at Work, Gene and Kata Keel from the Devon Group.
Well, you touched on my next question, which was how AI plays into all of this. So I will change that up a little bit. You were at RecBuzz and you saw Chris Foreman, I think. He said that in 5 years, AI, facilitated by job boards, recruitment marketplaces, will lead to sending out a job offer, qualified but confirmed job offer, to people who didn't even know they were being looked at, aren't looking for a job, don't consider themselves candidates, even passive candidates. And you'll get an email or you'll get a text from a company saying, here's a job offer, here's an amount, we'd like you to come to work for us. How realistic do you think that is? And are you looking at companies that are going to facilitate that in a few years?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a great way to think about what the future of job search looks like, right? In a sense that, and the interesting about the scenario you just described and what Chris described, there is that it kind of opens up a huge number of more candidates than are there that are sitting on like an active job site of applicants, and we keep hearing from, from companies that they're inundated with applications as the partially due to the fact that AI has made applications much more easy to do at scale. And so you can apply, write nice cover letters, customize it, and apply for, a magnitude higher number of jobs than you could have, pre AI. So I think that's leading to this. But I think once it gets, the other side of it gets much more involved in the sense of the sorting of it and the matching of it. Then the scenario that Chris describes is totally, I think, realistic, because I think there's a decent percentage of the workforce that would be interested. They haven't taken the initiative to go out and apply for a job, but if they got an inbound offer they'd already gone through the process. I think the process itself, right? You keep hearing from folks, is very intimidating for folks across the spectrum, not just to blue collar. But if you can get a pre-authorized offer, the same way you do for your credit card. I mean, how many of those do we get in the in the mail every day in this country, right? You get pre-authorized, that's largely I view it as very analogous to that. Is that okay? That's because there is a lot of credit data available, and people can know. Okay, yes, we can give Steve or Peter a credit card with X amount because we know his underlying financial health, we know his credit score, right? And so I think the same as you get the same ability to measure someone's working skill capability, and you get better skill assessment. Why should that not be the same for jobs?
I think we have time for one more question. Peter, if you're okay, let me grab it. One thing that's sort of intriguing to me that I think you're going to be able to shed a lot of light on is how a similar business model can differ massively in different markets. Just even like EU to the UK, let alone EU to the US or US to India. So maybe you can talk about the lightly skilled marketplaces in developing countries versus developed. What do you see as some of the big differences between those?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it depends on the regulatory also structure in a lot of these markets. And so where you're seeing in a heavily regulated job market like Europe, you've seen actually the largest lightly skilled platforms become the flex platforms have become some of the larger ones out there. I'm totally blanking on the name of the ones out of Spain, but they're one of the larger ones, but they a decent chunk of their business and the way they've attracted a lot of candidates is by giving that flexible work option, and a lot of that
Job and talent.
Yes, yes, exactly. That's what I was looking for. Job and talent, exactly. So they've grown very large in the continent, and we know that the continent has some of the tightest, regulatory environment for hiring and letting go of folks. And so I think because of that, finding technology ways to help optimize that has driven like folks on job and talent to become very large. And then we see that so I think that plays a large part in it, and then obviously just the way that workers operate, and the social safety nets you have too, like in markets like Europe, where you don't have to worry about working a certain number of hours to get healthcare, because that's provided by the government in Europe. But in the US, a lot more workers want to work a certain minimum number of hours to get some of those benefits. So I think there's all these nuances I'm seeing some job boards, like there's a great one here in New York called Bandana Jobs, and they break down. They've done a lot of work in just explaining how the job, the nuances of like the contractual obligations of a job, and they've done some great work explaining some of those, because you're signing this a pretty detailed contract, and just breaking it down is very helpful. And so I think everyone's taken. I've seen a lot of unique angles, and I think so. That's some of the differentiator of what we see. And I think in markets like India, obviously one of the larger current ones is called Apna, and they do a lot of work on they've experimented a lot with upskilling as well, and including that into the platform. I think in developing markets that could potentially be a little bit more important in some certain sectors where you see very fast growth, like in India for now. Example now, with the huge rise in manufacturing, you're going to see coming there. There's a lot of upskilling that has to be done. So I think we'll definitely see some platforms emerge that are integrating the upskilling component with the job marketplace component, and grow to become fairly large businesses. And so I think those are some of the nuances that we could obviously talk about it for a lot longer than we have time for, but between developed and emerging.
Awesome.
Let's see. We got in upskilling. We got in AI. We got in Chris Foreman. We got in Rec Buzz. We've covered the whole gamut.
Oh,
We're out of
thankfully,
time.
thankfully, nothing on blockchain.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes. No Bitcoin, no blockchain.
Yeah.
So
We'll save that for next one.
literally out of time. But thank you very much for joining us. And I'll see you when I'm in New York, because I'll be up there probably in June.
That'll be great. We'll look forward to it.
Awesome.
Well, thank you for the great conversation.
Yeah, be well. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Veer.